Welcome back. All right, so every now and then a new subscriber will say, "So what does Shannon do when there's no hockey on?" This. So in my room today, and I'm thinking, all right, so the expansion draft, and again I'm going through, and I'm all right. Protect this guy, don't protect this guy, protect like to the point where it's like, okay, enough. But today I thought, you know what, I'll go through and I'm going to make a list on the board, and based on who I think gets protected or doesn't, and things are going to change between now and expansion day, right? Teams are going to make deals to avoid some of the guys that are on this board getting picked, and maybe some deals to take guys who are on this board as well. So, that being said, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to explain this to everybody, and we'll start with Anaheim. So, we're going to go alphabetical order. I apologize to Washington and Winnipeg fans everywhere. They're going to be like, I got a notification. I got woken up. What kind of. Oh, we're at the end, aren't we? Dagnabbit. All right. Apologies for the language. So on the Anaheim side, what I've done here in black is the player that I think is at risk of being taken. Maybe the player that they don't want to see taken. And then in magenta underneath is the player that they're not worried about protecting. They don't really have to worry about protecting. So Danton Heinen, a restricted free agent who made $2.8 million this past season. I don't think they protect him unless they re-sign him, and then that may change who gets protected again. A lot can change over the next couple of weeks, right? So I wanted to make this as open-ended as possible. And Ryan Getzlaf, he's a UFA. I don't see any reason why he would get protected. I don't see Seattle taking him. I don't see Seattle getting him signed to an extension. And if they did, odds are Anaheim would say, well, but we're freeing up some money to sign some other guys, right? Arizona, Antti Ranta. Now, he's a UFA this summer, but is there some risk in losing him? Probably. Would they necessarily want to lose him? Maybe, maybe not. Again, he had an injury-riddled season, right? And you probably want Aiden Hill to stick around, so if they take Ranta and you keep Hill, you're probably pretty happy. But Hill may very well end up being the guy that goes too. It could be a goaltender from Arizona is what I'm saying. On the you don't need to protect him front, it's Hjalmarsson. UFA. Now, Seattle, when that list comes out, they can sit down and they can negotiate with these guys for 3 days. They can negotiate an extension with Nicholas Hjalmarsson. But at this stage of his career, if I'm Arizona, I'm willing to let that be a risk and lose Hjalmarsson to Seattle because you probably want to get younger, a little faster, and Hjalmarsson doesn't accomplish those things. On the Boston side, Lauzon. Lauzon, I think, is as good as gone. I can't see how, at an $850,000 cap hit for next year, Seattle doesn't take Lauzon, a young defenseman who can play top 4 minutes. And so Jake DeBrusk and his $3.675 million contract, you don't need to protect that. I would be really quite surprised if Seattle looked at those two guys being available and said, well, we'll go with DeBrusk. Now, DeBrusk can bounce back. He can get some of that goal scoring back. But again, Lauzon can play top 4 minutes, and he only makes $850,000. If Seattle really wants to maximize their salary cap this first year, getting those guys on the cheap contracts could be huge, because then that leaves all that other money for you to bring in. Let's say you can get Dougie Hamilton, this kind of thing, right? So yeah, Buffalo, Ullmark. I don't think Buffalo protects Ullmark when he's going to market. So they don't really have a goaltender they have to worry about protecting. So if Ullmark is picked up by Seattle, and he could be, absolutely, I would think he would discuss a contract extension with Seattle. And Ullmark's a good goaltender. If Seattle gets Ullmark as one of their top 2, and then goes out, and I'm going to cheat a little bit and go ahead, and gets Mrazek, who's also a UFA this year out of Carolina, Mrazek and Ullmark is not a bad tandem to start your team with. And then, of course, Okposo and his $6 million, you don't need to protect that, right? Calgary, Shillington or Tanev. So they're going to have a problem with protecting their defense. Now, if they protect 4 defensemen, and if they don't protect Giordano, who at $6.75 million, I don't think they worry about protecting. You can't protect 4 defensemen, because if you do, you can only protect 4 forwards. Then you're losing a key forward to Seattle. So do you protect Tanev or do you protect Shillington? Because I don't even want to make that call. I lean towards Tanev, but I'm a Canuck fan. Maybe I'm leaning towards Tanev for Canuck reasons. Shillington's a young defenseman. Tanev's got a large cap hit. Again, I think Seattle takes whoever gets exposed. I don't think Giordano's one they have to worry about. Carolina, Mrazek's there, UFA. Reimer is a UFA as well. I think Mrazek has more appeal than Reimer at this point. We'll see how this works, of course, for Ron Francis, who was general manager in Carolina and dealing with Carolina. He knows these guys. Maybe he doesn't draft a goaltender at all. And then I don't think you need to protect Hamilton, but then the question mark becomes Jake Bean, who's an RFA. Do they take Jake Bean? And I know I have that one in magenta. I was just thrown off by Carolina in general because you've got Hamilton and you've got Bean, who both probably don't get protected. But with Hamilton not protected, do you need to worry about protecting Bean? Or do they just jump over Hamilton and go, we'll take Bean because we don't want to have to deal with Hamilton's extension demands? It's going to be interesting because you've got a very good defense there. And I pretty sure they're going to lose a defenseman. But again, Mrazek, wouldn't want Mrazek. You can only lose one player. The danger that GMs have here is that they overplay their hand to try to make sure they don't lose somebody that they want to keep. And then they go back later and they go, probably should have kept Shea Theodore. You know, that Alex Tuck, he's pretty good. That Marchessault and Smith deal, why did we make that? So you have to make sure you're not making those deals that other teams made with Vegas. Chicago, Vinny Hinostroza had a good return. I don't see how he ends up being one of the protected. And he's a UFA this summer, so I don't see any reason why they would protect him. Does he end up in Seattle? Probably not. On the flip side, Connolly's $3.5 million contract, probably not at the cap hit. Probably not one that Seattle would have an interest in, so you don't worry about protecting it. For Colorado, Graves. Graves is still, to me, the guy who's most likely to end up being poached. $3.16 million cap hit for Graves. Probably ends up being the guy going to Seattle. And I'm only saying probably because, again, a lot can change over the next 2.5 weeks, right? Compher at $3.5 million. Hey, you probably don't need to worry about holding on to Compher or protecting him at all, because I don't think JT Compher, with the way this season went, ends up being a guy that's attractive to Seattle. Columbus, Kivlenieks. I like Kivlenieks. Again, he's young. $725,000 cap hit. You can plunk him in as your number 3 goaltender. Again, just think about it. Mrazek, Ullmark, Kivlenieks. That's not a bad top 3. This is why when people talk about all these other goaltenders, like, well, clearly Seattle's going to take them. Okay, Seattle can't take 15 goaltenders. They're probably going to take 4. Probably 3 of them are going to be guys they plan to keep. So it's possible that you see Jake Allen end up there, and then they decide who else they're going to keep out of the other guys. But it's going to be interesting. Nyquist. Now, this is the thing, too. Players who've missed a certain number of games, you can argue they have a career-threatening injury. You have to prove it medically, but it's possible they don't have to worry about Nyquist anyways. But if they do, I can't see them protecting him. Gustav Nyquist at this point at a $5.5 million cap hit. Seattle's not taking Nyquist. Dallas, Alexiak, in my eyes, is probably on his way to Seattle. He's a UFA this summer, so they'd sit down with him, work on an extension with him. I like Alexiak. I think he's top 4 defenseman. Hudobin, he's a UFA. I don't see any reason why Dallas protects him. Now, Bishop has a no movement clause. It is possible, same as I said with Nyquist, that they can argue career-threatening injury for a couple of the guys on that list. Like Sagan has no movement clause, Radulov, Bishop. They might be able to argue 2 of those 3, maybe all 3. Career-threatening injury, and you don't have to worry about protecting them. They're exempt. But Hudobin, either way, Ottinger's the future. Bishop should be ready to come back in the fall, you've got to think. And Hudobin, at this stage, I think is probably not one you have to worry about protecting. Detroit, I had a hard time with. I was like, okay, so Lindstrom or Cholowski? Lindstrom, Cholowski. Who am I protecting? Because I know I'm protecting Hronik. I know I'm protecting Stetcher. Or is Stetcher the guy who ends up being the odd man out? So again, for Detroit, a team that's very well protected, that may be a question mark. Nielsen at $5.25 million is cap hit. They're not going to protect Nielsen. Caleb Jones for the Oilers. Now, I predicted Caleb Jones not too long back, and the Oilers fans said, oh, they're going to protect Jones. He's got all kinds of potential. He makes $850,000 next year, but he had a rough year. He did not have a good year. And I still think Ethan Bear gets protected, and Jones is probably the one that ends up out there exposed and might be the guy who ends up getting taken by Seattle. James Neal, $5.75 million. No need to protect that. Drieger. Drieger's a UFA this summer. So again, another really interesting young goaltender out of Florida, right? They have to protect Bobrovsky. So Drieger, what do you do with Drieger, right? So I think he could be a fascinating pickup for Seattle, and that would be a huge loss. Although you have Spencer Knight coming up in Florida. Suddenly they have all kinds of goaltenders in Florida. Hornquist at $5.3 million, 34 years of age. I really don't think Seattle would take him. I don't think Florida needs to worry about protecting him. I say you protect the young guys, and if Hornquist's the one that goes, I think you accept that and you go, okay, now we got $5.3 million in cap space to deal with. General managers may look at losing a guy who's productive and say, you know what, we've got the cap space, we've got young guys coming up, we're okay with it. Trevor Moore for the Kings might end up being the guy who's on the outs now that they've picked up Arvidsson, and you have to think they're going to protect Arvidsson. They're not going to leave him exposed. And Jonathan Quick, you don't need to worry about protecting. You protect Peterson. Quick's $5.8 million cap hit. I can't see Seattle taking it. Minnesota, I like Nico Sturm. You want to look at a guy who might have a William Karlsson type season. I'm not saying 40 goals. No way. No. Don't quote me saying 40 goals. Don't. Nico Sturm at $725,000, and with what he did in that bottom six for Minnesota, fascinating. I really think with more ice time, he could score 15 or 20 goals next year. And at $725,000 for a cap hit, to me, it's a no-brainer. You want to have a mix of these cheap contracts and the more expensive guys. And the more of these cheap contracts you have, the more you can sign other guys to extensions and really build quite a good team. Now, Suter has a no-movement clause. I think they get him to waive it so they can protect Dumba. And he makes $7.5 million until 2025. I don't see any way Seattle takes Suter's contract. And it's possible Parise ends up waiving his no-movement clause, because Bill Guerin said he was going to talk to players about waiving their no-movement clauses. And then it's possible Sturm may not be available if Parise is exposed instead. And I also think Parise, if he's exposed and waives that no-movement clause, I can't see Seattle taking him either. Montreal, with the run they've been on to the finals, Sherratt's an interesting one. Now, I understand Jake Allen, or he's going to say Jake Allen's going to go. Right. So, I'd like to talk about somebody else. It's just an interesting thing. Just an interesting take. Just devil's advocate. Sherratt at $3.5 million has been pretty good. And one thing that you have to do as an expansion team, you have to have the goaltending and you have to have the solid blue line. If you want to, hold court and make it so the games are close, it may not make for some sexy hockey, but a guy like Sherratt could be really useful to them on that blue line. And then Danault's a UFA, so if they don't sign him between now and the expansion draft, you probably roll with it, and maybe Danault's going to go back to Montreal after. And when Seattle calls him, he just says, I don't speak whatever language you guys are talking. Sorry, bye. He was talking English. We were talking English. So, Nashville, Grimaldi, $2 million cap hit. Rocco may very well end up being gone from Nashville. He's very hardworking at $2 million again. Not that expensive. And I don't think this is a twofer. Johansson and Duchesne both make $8 million. Their contracts don't end soon. I can't see Johansson and Duchesne necessarily getting protected. I would not be surprised to see both. I would be very surprised if we don't at least see Duchesne left unprotected in the expansion draft. I don't see with those contracts that David Poile should have to worry about losing them. And not only, again, if somebody takes Johansson, that's $8 million in cap space for Nashville to go out and get somebody else. Then you can go out and get a Taylor Hall if Hall hits the market from Boston. And I thought about putting Hall up there for Boston. I thought, we don't know. He might re-sign. I don't know. But, if you get Duchesne's contract gone or Johansson's to Seattle, you free up some space. You might be able to fix things. Now, of course, adding Hall, he's not a center. They need more help down the middle. So, yes, that's a problem. On the New Jersey front, two defensemen here. Butcher at $3.7 million. Here's the thing. New Jersey is very well protected. New Jersey is very well protected in this expansion draft. They really don't have to worry about losing anything that they can't replace. And Butcher is a reach. Yes, Butcher is a reach to say it's a risk they'd lose Butcher. But Subban's $9 million contract, they don't need to protect that. I had a hard time with New Jersey, honestly, looking at their list and saying, okay, these are three defensemen they have to keep. I think, two. Their forwards, there's more risk there probably, but once I protected all the forwards that I felt they would protect, it really wasn't anybody major that was left out there. So New Jersey's in pretty good shape. I don't think Devils fans have to worry about this. The Islanders, Kiefer Bellows, restricted free agent, may end up being Seattle bound. And he may be better suited for that. One thing with Barry Trotz, he gets them to the Final Four. Absolutely, he gets the most out of the Islanders he can. But the kids don't find their way into the lineup easily. And so it is possible that Seattle comes in and takes advantage of that. They're not going to worry about protecting Komarov, his $3 million contract. I think Komarov was useful. I stand by that for the Islanders. But I agree that his $3 million contract, $3 million cap hit, would not be one that another team would find attractive, which is part of the reason why he cleared waivers so much this year. The Rangers are very well protected. Embarrassingly well protected. Hayek, as a restricted free agent this year, is the one I looked at and said, they might regret losing him. But, I mean, if I went to the Rangers and said, you guys could lose Libor Hayek in this expansion draft, I think their answer would be, okie dokie. And then I couldn't find a contract that they'd want to leave out there for somebody else to take. A lot of guys are going UFA. So there's really not a horrible contract on the New York Rangers. And now they've changed general managers, so we'll see if that continues, right? Quick, get Sather back in here. We don't have any bad contracts on the books. Ottawa, Matt Murray. So Matt Murray, who signs for $6.25 million per season, right, cap hit, goes to Ottawa. I don't think they protect him because I think they protect Gustafsson. So I had to show my work here. I think they protect Gustafsson. Do you really want to see Gustafsson go to Seattle and emerge as an NHL level goaltender, or maybe Seattle flips him for somebody else and they get something good for him? No. Murray, I think at that cap hit, I don't think Seattle touches him. I've already talked about Mrazek, Ullmark, Allen out of Montreal. We've got Drieger here out of Florida. Why would they want Murray? I don't see Murray having value to them. And then on a similar level, Dadonov at $5 million per season. I can't see them taking Dadonov either. Philly, they may risk losing Nolan Patrick. So Patrick apparently feels he'd be better off somewhere else. It would be tough to pass on him if you're Seattle, only because he is young. He was a top prospect. I don't think they would expect him to ever reach his ceiling, but he's a good young player that you can fit into your bottom six, and maybe you can make it work. Maybe you can get him back to where he looked like he was headed a couple years ago, right? And if it doesn't work, it's an expansion pick, right? And then I can't see JVR getting protected. $7 million cap hit. I don't see any reason Seattle would take JVR. Pittsburgh. And this is where I had to really show my work as Pittsburgh. So, protect up front. Crosby, Malkin, Gensel, Rust, Tanev, Kapanen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think those 6 guys get protected. But that means either McCann, who makes $2.9 million as a cap hit next year, or Teddy Bluger, who's an RFA this summer, might be on his way to Pittsburgh. Unrelated, I did order a Pittsburgh jersey, and I've ordered it with Bluger's name on the back. So if he goes to Seattle, I would like to formally apologize to Pittsburgh fans everywhere. I love Teddy Bluger, and I think Pittsburgh does too. So if Bluger gets protected, which of the other guys gets exposed? I don't think Kapanen. I can't see Tanev. I understand his contract's not great, but I can't see Tanev being exposed. Definitely not Rust, Gensel, Crosby, or Malkin. So, yeah. And then Zucker is there as well with his $5.5 million cap hit. Because of the other guys I'm talking about here, you don't need to worry about protecting Zucker, because I don't think Zucker would be more attractive at $5.5 million than McCann at $2.9 million. Or Bluger, set your own price, probably about $1 million a year. So, Pittsburgh's probably going to lose a pretty good player, unless Hextall works the phones and makes an agreement with them that they'll take somebody else. Noteworthy on the blue line, Pettersson, Matheson, one of them, maybe. So there are a few options for Seattle when it comes to Pittsburgh. Interesting options anyways. San Jose, they regret losing Matt Nieto, makes $700,000 next year. It won't kill them, obviously. San Jose's in pretty good shape, and I don't think they need to protect Jones. Kozanosh, I think, played well enough down the stretch to finish out the season that you want to protect Kozanosh and just let Jones be the guy who gets exposed in this year's expansion draft. At $5.75 million, he's not going to Seattle. Dunn, restricted free agent, may very well be the guy going to Seattle. There were trade rumors about him this year. It's hard to trade a guy like him right now. So this is part of what's holding up the trade market. Guys like Dunn, who might be popular in the trade market, if you're say Montreal, and you're like, all right, we'd love to have Vince Dunn in our blue line. Oh, but now we have to expose another defenseman if we get him, or we have to risk losing him to Seattle. So Seattle throws off the whole trade market for the next 3 weeks. So Dunn probably stays there and probably ends up exposed. Tarasenko, who's also on the market and may have the same problem, where, say, LA's looking at Tarasenko, well, we don't want to pick up Tarasenko and have to protect him and then maybe lose somebody else. Maybe Grundstrom's the guy we don't want to lose somebody like that. So Tarasenko likely stays with St. Louis, I would think, until after Seattle's made their picks public. We'll see, right? That $7.5 million, I think, would scare off Seattle. Now, Tampa. Tampa may very well have expansion to thank for when they're able to get under the cap, but how they're going to replace these players could be interesting. So on the blue line, I have them protecting Hedman, Sergachev, and Chernak because they have to. And they can't protect 4 defensemen because then they can only protect 4 forwards, and that's not going to happen. Which leaves McDonough and his $6.75 million contract out there. He's 32 years of age. It's an expensive contract, but if you look at some of the other contracts I've got on the board here they could take that are cheap, maybe you look at McDonough and go, we can plug him in as a top 2 or a top 4. His cap hit's a little bit high, he's a little bit older, but we're good with that. He's got that Stanley Cup pedigree. Can make us competitive right out of the gate, especially if they were able to work out some kind of a deal with Dougie Hamilton. You'd have Hamilton, you'd have McDonough, and suddenly we're saying, Seattle's blue line looks pretty good, and look at that goaltending. And then, of course, Tyler Johnson, his $5 million cap hit. Is it headed for Seattle? Probably. Is it going to be easy for them to get Seattle to take it? Probably not. But if McDonough and Johnson both went to Seattle, that's $11.75 million off of Tampa's cap right there. So that would help them out tremendously towards being able to stay under the cap next year. And again, Seattle won't do that for them for free out of the kindness of their hearts. So Tampa may very well use the expansion draft to get under the salary cap, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. Toronto. Now, Dermott, it's been rumored all year that Seattle wants Dermott. I honestly think Hall at $2 million, I don't see how you pass on Hall in favor of Dermott. Maybe they do. I'd go with Hall, honestly. And Kerfoot's $3.5 million cap hit, I don't see any reason that Toronto would protect Kerfoot. I just don't see it. Vancouver. So on the blue line, I protected Ulevy, Myers, and Schmidt. There are rumors out there that maybe Schmidt's on his way to town. I don't see that one happening either. Schmidt was playing better by the end of the season, I thought. He had a rough start. He's a very sociable guy, and because of all the protocols that were in place, he couldn't get to know his own teammates, and he was kind of a fish out of water. Give him another year in Vancouver. Please, for the love of all that's holy, give him another year in Vancouver. But what that means is that Hamonic, who's a UFA, may very well be the guy to go to Seattle. He likes playing on the West Coast. He's fine with playing anywhere, but he might really enjoy the idea of being in Seattle, which is not that far from Vancouver. Brand new team, different environment. And again, if you have Hamonic, you have McDonough, you have, say, Hamilton there, Sherratt, you might be able to put together a pretty decent blue line. You're going to want more goals, so you're going to want to find somebody who's willing to hand off somebody to you the way that Shea Theodore was handed off by Anaheim. Maybe Matt Dumba is available out of Minnesota and you can pick him up, right? So yeah, Hamonic in my eyes is the one that, and I would that would kind of tick me off. That'd be the second year in a row that the guy that Quinn Hughes is paired up with ends up out of town. Virtanen at $2.55 million, and with everything going on with Virtanen, hey, you don't need to protect him. Yeah, Louis Eriksson would be the obvious pick, but for me right now, Virtanen's the guy I want to mention because there's no reason to protect Jake Virtanen. Vanacek out of Washington, another goaltender, $716,000 cap hit for Vanacek. So when people say, well, why wouldn't they take Braden Holtby? Because you can get Vanacek at $716,000. You can get Ullmark. You can get Mrazek. You can get Drieger. Why in the world would they want Holtby? So yeah, Vanacek at $716,000. That might be tempting for them because Samsonov's going to be the one that gets protected. And then Nick Jensen at $2.5 million. I don't think there's any reason to worry about protecting him. Again, Vanacek being out there would be part of the reason for that. I thought about throwing Dillon up there because I don't think Dillon gets protected, but at $3.9 million, I don't know. We'll see what happens with Washington's list. Washington's list is interesting. So we'll round it out with Winnipeg. They're going to, I believe, they're going to protect Morrissey, Pionk, and Stanley. I think with the rookie season Stanley had, they'd be crazy not to protect him, which means Dylan DeMello and his $3 million cap hit would be available. DeMello doesn't do a lot offensively, but defensively he is pretty darn solid. And again, a brand new team is going to be looking for those solid defensemen. And Seattle will likely do the same thing Vegas did. Vegas grabbed, what was it, like 10 NHL level defensemen and then traded some of them off immediately. And maybe DeMello is one of those guys the same thing happens with. You draft him, you come up with your chart, and you say, okay, well, DeMello doesn't really fit into our top 6, and he's not a guy that we want to carry as an extra, and then you try to trade him out. And Stastny, he's UFA. I don't see any reason why Seattle grabs him, and I don't see any reason why Washington or Winnipeg would protect him since he's UFA. Winnipeg's in pretty good shape. I will say this, yes, Mason Appleton is very likely the guy who goes in Winnipeg, but DeMello's an interesting one, because again, defense is very important. Though Appleton, he could be a steal, and Appleton could be a guy that we look back years down the road and say, man, he was available in expansion. Couldn't believe it. All right, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And yeah, I'm wearing my Seattle Mariners for this, just to show that Seattle Mariners and the Seattle Kraken, the logos aren't that far off. The branding is different. The colors are somewhat different, but it's a similar look. I was kind of surprised when Seattle went with that. And I realized, you know, with it being kind of hot and humid, why am I not wearing baseball jerseys a little bit more when I have an opportunity like this? Because I have a bunch of them. And it keyed in with me today of baseball jerseys are cooler. Why am I not wearing those when I have an opportunity? Yeah. All right. Eventually, slow on the uptake, but eventually I get it. All right. Thank you guys so much for all your support. Let me know what you guys think. Go through that tool on Cap Friendly, the interactive tools, and you can find the expansion draft simulator, and go through to your heart's content, and just let me know in the comment section below who you think teams need to worry about losing and who they probably shouldn't protect that's a veteran that maybe we would have thought they'd protect, but now after the season we've just had, we go, nah, they probably don't need to worry about protecting that guy. Let me know your thoughts, and hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.